Hey, hi, hello everybody. I'm Sudesh, working with Manulife. I'm the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Asia. And here with us, we have two amazing trailblazers. So first off, from the other end, we have Cici. So she's got tons of experience in the realm of minerals and stones and resources. And right down the middle, we have Professor Catherine
Hi.
Chia from Hong Kong University, and anything about biomedicine and genetics. There you go. She said, if you notice, we're all wearing blue, matching the screen at the back as well. So it is all planned. And also, we are proud to represent Malaysian Chambers of Commerce, part of the Women Internal Network as well. And thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today. It is going to be a fun conversation, I hope. Okay, trailblazing. Women are usually, there's always a stereotype that we always see. There's only certain positions or certain roles or certain things that you can do. And our parents taught us that men or women can only do certain things. If you're born a girl, you can only either be in this line of work, or all you do, you just get married and just take care of your husband. And if you're a guy, you need to go and do business, you need to make money for your kids, and nobody else can make money apart from you. So there's always been this stereotyping, especially in the Asian context and Asian culture. The world has changed so much now. And we're going to start talking about that, how the world has been for the both of you, and how we can actually advise future women and to be a bit different and to be treated fair and equal. So let's start off with you, Cici. So I've been trailing your LinkedIn.
Oh,
You start to look at stuff, and you know your stones.
oh, okay.
You know your resources and your stones and your minerals. And would you like to tell us, how did you get into that line of work?
Well, I think for me, I was born in China, but I grew up in the United States in a very small town in Colorado, where I was the only Asian kid. So I always felt a little bit like an outsider. And it wasn't until I went to college that I met other foreign students that I felt that I could be different, that it's okay to be different and to have different viewpoints. And so for me as a woman in a male dominant industry such as oil and gas and resources and mining, I felt like how I felt when I was a kid growing up in in an area where all it's white people. I felt like it's okay to be different, to have different opinions, but you have to know that you're good at something, and it's okay to speak your mind. And so I think the resource industry has traditionally been a male dominant industry. But I think as an Asian and as a woman, I bring a different perspective. And I have seen a huge change, as you said, in this industry. We're including more and more women, and I hope the future we will have even more women in our industry.
I mean, it must have been hard also, like going to the mining areas and quarries, and telling men wearing a hard hat, like, this is how you do it and this is how you not do it, and this is must be difficult. Was it challenging?
Um, I think one of the reasons that I'm in science is because my parents are both research scientists, and I actually was born in a mine, near a mine in northern China. So I think it's in my blood. I feel very comfortable with rocks and looking at stones. So I never had a problem feeling, maybe I was the shortest little one wearing a hat, but I've always felt like an adventure when I go into a mine, going deep underground, going to see things and understanding how the earth works, right? We are a very, very small part of this earth. And understanding this whole, like Professor Chai, you understand about the nature and biology. For me, I think understand earth science is a fundamental thing that everybody should. And especially in our world right now, we're talking about environment, we're talking about diversity and women. We need to have more understanding of how this earth works. So I never felt excluded. I never felt different. I actually filled with excitement every time I go into the field and every time I go underground to see some rocks, right?
Oh my, even when you go caving and going to look at rocks, we get like claustrophobic, and you do it for a living.
Yes.
Switching right to the middle.
Yes.
So Prof. Kathy, I mean, senior educator, biology, bioscience, and stuff that I stay away from. It's just like typical Indian family. There's only three professions that would feed you: medicine, engineering, and law. And you took that, and I was running away from it. And So how has it been? I mean, growing up and going on to a role of academia as a woman.
Yeah, so thank you, Sudesh. Um, well, I also don't come from Hong Kong. In fact, I was just born in the UK, but went at a very young age back to Malaysia with my parents. My father was doing his PhD in London at the time. And so I grew up in Malaysia. And my mom never went to university, didn't have a job. But she always told me that you must get a job. You must be able to be on your own 2 feet. And so my parents were very supportive. My father had a PhD, so I mean, he knew what it was to be an academic. Um, and I think what happened was that and when I was in high school, I became very passionate and interested in DNA. And so I even made a plasticine model of DNA for one of our school exhibitions. And so I decided that I needed to go to university and study more about DNA. And my parents sent me off to England to study. And so I continued to work in studying biology genetics and did my PhD and did some postdoc work in the UK. So I have always been passionate about research and finding out how biology, life works at the molecular level. And then I think circumstances, and I think this happens to many women, circumstances happen that are not necessarily professional and brought me to Hong Kong. And that was quite a long time ago. And when I arrived in Hong Kong, I had a job as a lecturer at the university, starting off my own independent lab. But the problem was Hong Kong had no money for research. There was nothing. It was at a time, the middle 80s, that there was basically no funding for research. And so as a researcher, it was quite difficult. And I would say, to summarize how I managed to survive and been lucky enough to get to a senior position at the university was for several things. One key factor was mentorship. Mentorship from my previous postdoctoral mentor and from another international famous woman scientist. So one male and one female. And between them, over the years, through their mentorship, I managed to establish my own research program. Initially, they pointed me in the direction of getting money from the UK, actually, because there was no money in Hong Kong. And then there was a foundation that was started in Hong Kong called the Croucher Foundation, which actually helped me to get started. So fast forward now, many years later, Hong Kong is having a thriving research community. However, it's still far behind in funding compared to the rest of the world. But along the way, I don't think I faced any discrimination because I was female. I think that in academia, there are barriers if you are female, but you have to be brave enough, passionate enough to persevere. And I think at the end of the day, women can make it and do actually have a possibility of contributing. So especially nowadays, where you have, many discoveries need to be made in biomedicine, in developing treatment and understanding disease mechanisms. I think women have got a very important part to play. But the problem is how do we encourage them to go into this, and how do we mentor them and keep them and sustain them so that they can make a significant contribution to the development of science and technology. Yes. At least I'm talking about science and technology because that's my area. But of course, there's many other areas where they could contribute.
This is a nice segue to our next piece. And then you hit the nail on one particular word that you mentioned, which is mentoring and coaching and support. I think that is where it's usually lacking, where you have a vision, you have a dream, you want to pursue something, but there may not be somebody behind you, guiding you or coaching you and pointing you to the direction that you want to go to. Not everybody has that access to mentorship and stuff. So I think it's a good point. So I'm going to switch at you, latching on to mentoring and coaching. So do you have a mentor figure who helped you in your career?
I feel like because my field is dominant by men,
Mm.
and there were one woman that I could look towards. I think in general, I just been more inspired by my grandmother, my mother, who are both very, very strong women, and who are, especially my mother, who is a scientist of her own. So I've always never been that afraid to speak my mind. And I think when I was younger, I lacked the confidence. And being Asian female, I was taught to be more humble, which doesn't really work in America. American, you need to top your own horn. And I think that's something you gain with age. You're more confident and you're not afraid to speak my mind. And I have been able, and I have to credit the people who I work for and who have been along my 20 years career. And most of them are men from different areas. And they've all pushed me, but they all believed in me. They all think I was good, and I am. And now I feel. So that takes a process. And I think that's something that I think all women really undergoes. And I wish that I had more of that confidence when I was younger, to do more, to demand more. So not necessarily one person, but I think all along, so many people have helped me in my career.
That is brilliant. I mean, sometimes you just have to find that path, and you have people along that path. It can be colleagues and family,
Yeah.
and friends, or even a book or an article that you read that inspires you to wanting
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
better than yourself. And I think this is a great story also. But and we spoke about this a couple of days ago on the narrowing gap of the challenge. I mean, we talk about sustaining and sustainability in this conference. And third day is about D&I, which is passionate to me, and inclusion is passionate. But as we look at the pyramid, and we spoke about the pyramid. So in terms of population, the gender population in the region, we have a large population of women in the region. And that applies to all the industries as well. So at the ground level, staffing level, at least 50 or more than 50% of are women in an organization or in a corporation. But as you go above the pyramid, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And sometimes it doesn't even reach a pinnacle. It just plateaus into a flat where there are no women at the top. So, and this is quite prominent in many industries, in the banking and finance industries, in academia, and we spoke about it, and especially in mining. And so, what do we do in terms of how do we make that pyramid gap wider at the top to come to a point where we don't need to talk about inclusion anymore, that it becomes norm? So, Prof, what do you think?
Yeah, also Dash, it is absolutely true. There's a big dichotomy, and I think in career progression for women, like as we talked, at the undergraduate level, it's about 50-50 male-female. But when you reach to the senior level, and in Hong Kong, I did a quick survey, it gets to at the level of professor or chair professor, something like 80-20, or even extreme in some universities, 90-10. And then when it comes to the presidents of all the 10 universities in Hong Kong, it's 100% male. So the question is it because females are not able to get to the top? Or is it intrinsically there isn't something to support them? And I think the reasons are probably very complex. Part of it may be whether women feel they can spend enough time to combine both being a family maker as well as doing research in academia, for example, but also whether or not there is enough encouragement and support to take into account that maybe career clocks, timetables, right? Number of years taken to reach what stage? Does it have to be the same for men and for women? And are there in place mechanisms to allow men also to take time off as well as women? Or is it always the woman who has to take time off? And I keep talking about mentorship, and I think mentorship is important. I think also affirmative action in terms of giving women the opportunity to have a say or to have their voice heard in important committees, for example, policy making, that's important. Ability, for example, I think, we now know that, for example, the Greater Bay Area, they talk about science and technology, new new developments, how do we go to the next level of sustainability, of innovation, technology. But what's being done to foster the approximately 50% of female students at university starting level, to get them to be able to contribute, because they can contribute. I mean, intellectually, ability-wise, they're able. So there's something that we are doing that's not sufficient, and it can't be just sort of like let it happen. I think there has to be at this stage something that supports women and encourages them to go on, to be able to contribute.
It's a good point. So I think that you mentioned two important points over there. One is the KPIs and the tick in the box. Are we just ticking the box just to put a figurehead women in leadership position? I've done my bit, and there you go. I've already done it. And the other bit is on the difference between equality and equity. So equality, yes, we were fighting for women's rights and women's equality. Treat me the same for many, many years. But now we're talking about equity. So where we understand everybody has a different starting point.
Yes.
And that we acknowledge that there's a different starting point. So the role that we need to play is bring everybody to a point of equality. Then you apply meritocracy along the board. So I think this is where you mentioned where when you have young students in school who are dying to try new fields and new ways in technology, in science, in the non-specific, the non-identified roles. You don't only go to teaching, you only don't go to cooking or stuff. So roles that we play as mentorship. So from a mining industry, where there's no KPI that exists, kind of a thing, do you need to have a KPI to have women leaders here and there? Because again, the perception that it only belongs to the male population.
Oh, we do. So I think I've been a non-executive director for over 10 years in Australia listed companies, and I've seen a huge change in the last 10 years, especially in the number of women that's on the board. It started with 20%, but now the goal is 40%, and we're also trying to have more women leaders. But I think the most important thing is we have to look forward. We have to look to the next generation, which means really starting them early to be interested in sciences. And also not just to do the top roles, we could also start at the bottom. We have even programs where maybe the woman is a hairdresser or a nail person. Okay, there's nothing wrong being that, but the wages are quite low versus if they could be a truck driver where they could make 5 times more. And it's very flexible hours. Australia has always been known for good family work balance. And we're having more time off for maternity leave. We're also saving the position for women when she comes back. Also, you have to remember, as women, we live 10 years younger than men. We actually could be more instrumental even in later stages in our lives. Because we only see older men on top of the organization, especially board of directors. You have these chairmen that's been ossified, right? But as a woman, I think we're wiser and we're better, especially especially when we gain age. Right, we have much more confidence. We become better with age. So hopefully, we see more women for older women as well.
That's good. There's a nice question here that actually talks about it as well. That came from the audience.
Okay.
And we spoke about this as well. There's a time in age where women choose to do something different, like having a family. There's nothing. I mean, we all want to procreate and grow the population as the best as we can. So this question came from Anthony Andres, and he asked: so the pandemic and religious extreme politicians have set women's socioeconomic achievements back a few decades. How do you propose to repair those damages, including those being done to women's reproductive rights? I'm looking at you, Prof. It's like this is a tough one. It's hitting different nuances where we subdue the roles that women play. And how can women come out from that?
I'm not so sure that the pandemic has affected reproductive rights. Do you think so?
I'm not sure. I always felt reproductive rights pertains to China and the one-child policy.
Yeah. In fact, I have a suspicion that maybe more babies are going to be born in the next few years. Well,
I think
couples have to work at home, right?
Yeah, we're working at home.
Working at home, right?
But maybe because from a political economic standpoint, there has always been suppression in different countries for women to play different roles, and from even driving licenses in some parts of the world that only women started only recently having opportunities to get to drive and stuff like that. So I think, but I personally feel it is changing. It is getting better, and women are starting to speak up because they have mentors and allies who are speaking on their behalf.
Yes.
And this also goes beyond not just gender, but also skin color, sexual orientation, disability. We're having more allies that speak on your behalf.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So this is doing the allyship is huge.
Yeah. So it shouldn't be just women making a noise, actually. They need to have allies who are going to support them. And actually, probably it's more effective to have the male or somebody else actually speaking up for you rather than you trying to speak up for yourself, right?
Of course.
How about you, Sadesh? You, as a minority in a country and as a person of color, and as a male working in a female-dominated organization, how is your experience? What's your feeling about the change?
You see, now the panelists are asking the panelists moderated the question.
That's an important question. It's important.
We flip the script. Growing up, so I grew up in Malaysia, and being in this skin color wasn't as easy as it is.
Yes.
It's always hard. You have to try multiple times harder just to stay above, to be equitable, to be treated equal. So it was harder growing up. But coming on to now, I've done different roles, and now into the world of HR and human resources, is always seen as female dominated. And yes, there are lesser men. I feel unique. I feel special, because I feel like I'm being heard to get a different viewpoint. And also, this is where the allyship and mentoring plays a huge role. Because in my role as supporting and introducing diversity, equity, and inclusion into the region, into the populace, as well as my company, I've heard that people are more open to listening from a different angle, because I am visually seen as diverse. So the ears are bigger, and people want to hear you. So that has helped in my role. And this is where I'm using this opportunity to educate and create new allies. That it is okay to love the same kind. It's okay to love the same sex. It is okay to be different. It is okay to be disabled. It is okay. And from a mental health issue, it is okay to not be okay as well. So this is where opportunities are coming up for people to speak up.
Yeah.
I think that is how you sustain. When we talk about sustainability, how do you sustain values and human beliefs and behaviors? Is you listen. You open your hearts and minds.
But I also feel that going back to women, or actually any minority, that they need to believe in themselves. Because if they don't believe in themselves, then it's hard to sustain. So they have to have a passion. They have to believe that they can do it. And hopefully there will be others who will see that they have that passion and will support them to make that journey. Because at the end of the day, I think everybody needs to have somebody who's supporting you when you're making a tough journey.
So there's 2 or 3 questions which are similar here. And it is going back to how do you juggle between career and family when you start to be a mother, you will lose your career because the amount of time will be put into raising your children. And another person also asked something similar. And we spoke about that. When you decide that you want to change your life direction because you want to have a family. And the weight of that, or the burden, comes upon women because men can't procreate. And so from that angle, how do you support and encourage women to return back to the workforce? I think this is how do you juggle and return back? Not when you come back going somewhere lower, but come back to the same or above.
So I think that this is like sort of a multi-level complex question. On the personal side, I think, marriage is a partnership. And so your partner needs to buy in also that he has a responsibility also to contribute. And in places like Hong Kong, it's actually easier for women, I think, to continue working because there's always some help. But of course, you can't just leave your children to a helper to bring up. So I think it's important that the partner should also have time to take his part also in helping to bring up the children. Second thing is on the level of the employer. The employer should encourage or accommodate a woman to take some time out, and also maybe encourage and support men to take some time out. I know in Scandinavia, they allow 1 year for a person who has had a child, and men and women can get leave and come back to their job. And I mean, it goes even to some extreme. In some countries, I know my friend in Finland, the government pays for a nanny to help her to continue. And she has succeeded. She has 4 children. She's now the vice president of a university. So it's obviously been very helpful to her. Otherwise, I don't see how she could have done it. So I think you need support from both sides, both at the personal level and from the government.
So I hope there are senior
Employers.
leadership listening to the audience now and listening to our stories. Please introduce 1 year paternal leave. Take it openly. But you're right. The support not only comes from the employer, it's from the community as well as the governments. And they play a huge role.
You have to pay more taxes.
Exactly. And so I think this is where we need to bridge the gap. Again, how do you sustain the population? How do you sustain gender inclusion and all the different minority communities, where it comes to a point where it doesn't matter who or what or what you believe. It is about who belongs. And as long as we come to a point where everybody is treated the same and we all belong, I think that is the ultimate value that we want to come towards. I think that is where we would like to end. Any closing, a couple of word remarks from CC?
Well, I just feel like because of my job, I've traveled all over the world and I've seen many different countries. And I feel like it doesn't matter if you're men or women, minority, different skin colors. We all really aspire to the same thing, is to have a life. And I think that a lot of times we live in our little bubble. We live in Hong Kong, a very nice little bubble. But the thing is, we need to be more inclusive. We need to think about the people who doesn't have electricity, who still needs to go to the next stage. And we're talking about ESG, we're talking about environmental social governance. But sometimes you cannot use the same measurement for countries that are still don't have electricity, many parts of Africa, for example. And then the other thing that I think is so important for every country is education, is to provide every child with the basic level of education. And it has to be equal, because we also have social economic problems. And you see it all over the world. You see it in New York, you see it here. Some kids go to, with a chauffeur, and some people just walk to school, and some people, don't have the resources. So how to level this playing ground for everyone, that is the main issue going forward. And I'm hopeful. I have seen already a lot of difference and a lot of changes. And I'm hopeful going in the future that we will all cooperate and we work together and we include everybody and for a better world, for us to survive and for us to thrive.
Nice.
Very
One or
good.
2 sentences from you?
I think, this whole topic and conference has been inspiring to make us think more deeply about the issues that we face and how can we go forwards to solve these issues. And hopefully those people listening will hear and contribute also.
Hopeful as well. I mean, thank you so much, CC, and thank you so much, Prof. Kathy, for this. And thank you, all of you, to the audience for the questions, as well as listening. And as they said, we hope this conversation just continues. It doesn't stay over here. It goes on. And don't just stop, act. Make change. Make small change within yourselves, your family, your colleagues, and your employees. Because talking alone doesn't work. Yeah. You need to make action. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And have a good remaining rest of the hours enjoying the conference.